and young people. And I thought that was hard. And indeed it was hard, but Michelle obviously likes an even greater challenge, because after we worked together at the Department for Education, she joined the Department for Health and Social Care. And the challenges of recruiting and retaining the adult social care workforce, well, 3 times the size of the school workforce, larger than the size of the NHS workforce, best part of 10%, vacancies, 150,000 or so, about as many as 30% of the adult social care workforce leaving each year. I used to argue when I was at the Department for Education, of course I did, that the task of supporting the nation's children was the most important priority facing the country. But now that I'm no longer at the Department for Education and getting a bit older myself, I can agree with all of you here that the sign of a civilized society is the way that we help people with disabilities and people as they get older with the care and support they need. And the workforce challenges are clearly great. Money would be nice, but there's nothing I don't think that any of us have heard, either from the government today or the Labour Party, that there's a lot more taxpayers' funding coming our way. After all, the amount of tax that we pay collectively is at historically high levels, and there are very large numbers of demands upon that money, including from the higher education sector. I was relieved to hear it wasn't the university that was paying for the delicious food we had this evening. That would have been a bit of an own goal if it had been, but it wasn't. So lots of demands and taxes are high, so we can't expect lots of more money to be coming our way to fix these problems for us, although some would be nice. And we can't really expect individuals benefiting from care to be paying even more than they're paying today, can we? So money, even if it's part of the answer, is not going to be the full answer. And so how are we then going to recruit and retain all the people that we need to meet the needs of people as they get older and as they deal with the disabilities that they're facing? That's the project that King's have been working on with funding from UKRI, other universities too, over the last 3 years. What can we do differently? How can we help support the workforce to do their jobs differently in a way that would therefore be more rewarding and more sustainable, encourage more people to join and fewer to leave? The programme's about to come to an end, and so what better time to hear from the people who've running this programme, what they've found so far, and what they think should come next. I'm going to ask Jakov from Edinburgh, and then Linda from KCL to summarise what they found so far, the nature of the challenge. Then Michelle from the Department of Health, give her thoughts, and George from the UKRI who funded it. And then we'll have a bit of QA, and then a second session, bear with me, as we explore what happens next. First of all, Jakov.
Thank you. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Jakov Andrić. I'm lecturer in organizational behavior at the University of Edinburgh Business School. And I'm also a co-investigator and member of the core team on supporting healthy aging at work project. And on behalf of Professor Wendy Loreto, the principal investigator of the project, and also the entire team, I would like to thank Linda McKee and the Healthy Working Lives team for this opportunity to speak to you today. Like Healthy Working Lives, SHAW was a 3-year project. Sorry, that's good. Was a 3-year large-scale project funded through Social Behavior and Design Research Program as part of the Healthy Aging Challenge. And we have the director of the challenge here, George McGuinness, and who will be telling you more about the challenge itself in a few minutes. Project SHAW was designed with an aim to use an interdisciplinary approach to create innovative workplace interventions in support of health and well-being of workers in later life. The project was delivered in 2 stages. In the first one, we've interviewed just under 160 workers over 50 in 4 sectors, including social care sector. And in our interviews, we were interested in what we call hidden health issues, or issues that are usually not discussed openly in the workplace. These include menopause, cognitive change and cognitive decline, financial well-being, and also health issues related to informal caring. We also conducted analysis on large data sets, Understanding Society Health and the NEST data, to provide further context for our study. In the second stage, we've done a co-design process with a selection of participants from the first stage, and we engaged our participants in a variety of activities over a period of 1 year. And you can see some of these amazing things and designs that our team has developed in our exhibition in the next room. So, just to summarize some of the findings that are coming from Project Shaw. First of all, our findings indicate that there are significant challenges facing care workers as they age in the workplace, particularly in relation to work intensification and the resulting limited time to reflect on their own health, and also relationships between health and work. The other really important part is the psychological safety in relation to discussing age and health in their respective workplaces. So as a result, we've developed several approaches to supporting care sector organizations and care workers as they age. First and foremost, we were focusing on line managers because they are very much critical to supporting healthy aging at work, as they are very much a visible face of the organizational culture of any organization. And they also enact that climate of psychological safety where people feel free to discuss some of their issues. So we collaborated with Age Scotland and contributed to the development of line management training offering that was specifically designed to support and to increase knowledge and confidence of line managers when discussing age and health with their employees. So this training was delivered to 1,100 line managers across Scotland, and it was partly funded by the Scottish Government Workplace Quality Fund. In the second thing that we were focusing on was sleep. As we all know, sleep is a very important part of the health and well-being status of any individual, and we were really seeing quite significant issues and disruptions that people were facing, not only in terms of duration of sleep, but also quality of sleep, which was much more relevant in that sense. And crucially, these sleep disruptions were very much affecting their working lives. So these insights all fed into a collaboration with Sleep Action, an NGO that was on a new accreditation model for organizations to regard sleep as an organizational issue that can be supported as part of employees' health and well-being needs. Another part of the work also relates to supporting menopause at work, where we are again collaborating with Age Scotland. And finally, we have developed our own application, web-based application, called Shaw App, which enables workers in later life to reflect on their own health, to follow their own progress over time, but also to support that communication part between the employee and the organization when facing health concerns and challenges. So for more information about the project itself, please come and see us in the other space. We have a small exhibition. You can also try out our app, and it will be really great to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much. I will just give it over to Innovate.
It's a bit tight up here, isn't it? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, everyone. It's fantastic to see so many people here tonight. And I suppose the reason we're here tonight is that care matters, as Jonathan said already. And many of us are already engaged in the adult care system, our relatives. We're looking forward to a future where we hope that care services will be available. And what can we do to nurture care? Well, first off, thank you for sharing the platform tonight, Yakov, because one fantastic thing about this programme has been the potential to work across a series of projects. And already the line manager work that you've done, and also the business app, links very much to healthier working lives. And before we go any further, I would like to say we wouldn't be here this evening if it wasn't for the care workers, if it wasn't for the time, the dedication, the actual energy that they've given to our respective research projects. So I think we recognise that from within the sector, people do want to improve. They want to work towards better provision and a sense of having a career. But also we wouldn't be here tonight if it wasn't for the support from George, from the programme, and from the academic director who's with us tonight, Judith Phillips, and from Lucy Cresley of the funding body. This truly has been a team effort, and I should also mention Elaine Douglas as well. You've helped us and supported us to work across those projects. Okay, so the core question for Healthier Working Lives was, how can we improve the working lives of the adult care workforce, adult social care workforce, but that the workforce themselves should inform, shape and guide the development. It's their ideas to improve their industry. Now, most of you have picked up 2 handouts this evening, which are at the registration desk. So I'm not going to run through what's in the handouts. I'm just going to give some key pointers in terms of what we've done and where the lessons learned are. Because to us, this is a staging point on an ongoing journey. We're highly committed to working with the people we've met, the care homes, etc., but moving that out across the UK. What I would say is that we started out during the second lockdown. Seems like ages ago. It's not so long ago. And we had to work very hard to build trust. Now, having built that trust and having spent years working with the care homes, the residential care homes, we want to continue to nurture that. And I think Yakov and the Shore Project, you would agree that these have been challenging times in any workforce, any workplace, but especially for the over 50s in the care sector. Now, why the over 50s? Well, they're going to be 65 in 2035, and a key part of the programme was to encourage colleagues, encourage workers to develop healthier dimensions to their life and healthy years to their life, and hopefully to reach 65 feeling healthier and still in employment. And by 2035, the 50-year-olds we started working with back in 2021 will be hitting that goal. And let's hope they hit it in fine fettle. So what did we do? Well, after spending quite a bit of time building trust and working through a trusted organisation, Scottish Care, which is an umbrella grouping for 400 independent providers of care. We then undertook 44 interviews with care home workers. We spent 9 days and 1 overnight in focused ethnographic observation across 6 different residential care homes in different parts of Scotland. They were different sizes, shapes, different funding models, and several of them were mixed, but increasingly we can see a specialisation within adult social care, particularly focused on dementia. Okay, at the same time, one of our partner groups, organisations, Creative Venue, undertook 32 interviews with care businesses of different sizes and shapes, and the businesses, some of whom came along the whole journey with us, were actually trying to explore ways that they could develop technology, services, products to help the issues around recruitment, retention, better career opportunities, but most importantly, what we find from all the data collection is that care workers want to spend time with those they're caring for. That's why they come into the job. And there are many irritations that they're grappling with at the moment, not least the paper and pen collection of data, and not least all the risk, etc., and the risk management that necessarily came in during the pandemic and has stayed with us. And at the moment, we're not really questioning why that's staying. So in late 2022, we embarked on our co-design process, and colleagues in the room tonight from Edinburgh College of Art led us through that process. And across 6 months, they undertook 6 different workshops and actually worked with 310 people. Through that process, they developed a new overarching methodology known as the Ripple Framework, and that is available in the exhibition area across the hallway there, alongside the app and the exhibition from Shaw. So please go and have a look at that. But through that work, they actually created a sense of deeper trust, but also generated ideas from the workers themselves, which they then kept refining. What would this look like? What changes can I make to my workplace? Now, it's important to recognize that this is a group who are rarely asked what they think about their workplace. And in fact, through our project, we did find one care home where 50% of the staff have been in employment for over 10 years. So somebody somewhere is doing something right. And I know that Skills for Care have also been working on this too. And this whole turning round recruitment to think about retention in order to recruit is quite important. So we then had, coming into March 2023, what we term a pivot workshop, where we brought together the businesses, that dimension with Creative Venue. We connected with Codebase, colleagues here again tonight, who actually are the largest accelerator grouping within Europe, with the workers, the over 50s workers, with managers and business owners to sit down and say, how can we get these problems, these issues, which might be resolved, into some sort of problem statement. Honestly, as academics, we watch Dragon's Den. Honestly, I think we just don't know what it's really like out there to go out and take an idea, put it into a problem statement, and then pitch it to people who could necessarily invest in it, but most importantly, would make changes with those ideas. We had 4 groups, they're now down to 3. And the first one is focused on retention, and retention as an aid to recruitment. And we've done quite a lot of work there and secured additional funding to develop a project that we're calling Care Stories. A little goes a long way. And if you explore why people are staying in the care homes that are good on retention, it is frankly giving people time and support, lunch breaks, mental health support, well-being, and appreciating that they want to spend time with the people they care for. Secondly, digitization to personalize care. And I think that goes back to the point I made earlier about paper and pen, and the fact that in some areas, depending on the nature of the care needs of the recipient of care, it can be up to 24 pages that have to be completed each day by paper and pen. So people are very keen to work on that. And last but not least, how can we bring this all together to promote consistent professional practice? And this comes back to the leadership initiative in the Shore project. Now, I've probably had my 4 minutes, so I'm just going to wrap up now by saying, encouraging everyone in the room here, researcher, policymaker, care provider, to get down and just get dirty. Get in there, get on the ground, just go with the care workers and the managers. Initiatives such as user researchers, which have been developed in parts of Scotland, we should have a look at that and think about these in terms of informing our developments. And so, to close, we are at a stage now where we're discussing with different groups how we might take the ideas further forward. We want to think about how we can validate, triangulate the ideas, take them to different homes in different parts of the UK, because of course devolution has driven funding in certain types of ways, but also to think about how we can actually pitch to investors, pitch to businesses that might be interested in taking some of the ideas into their workplaces. So with that, I'll just thank everyone again who's been involved in this stage of Healthier Working Lives, and really watch this space and see where we go in the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So Jonathan set out the big challenges that we face as regards social care. I'm going to talk now in my 4 minutes about one aspect of those challenges and what this government is doing about it. That's on the care workforce. I should say it's the care workforce in England because, as Lynn's just said, we have a devolved system for social care. I was going to start with what I thought was a little known fact about the size of the care workforce, but Jonathan slightly stole my line on that. But the care workforce is bigger than the NHS workforce. I do think not many people appreciate that point. And care workers just do amazing work. I mean, Linda started to talk about that. I followed a care worker around a few months ago, going from home to home, so a domiciliary care worker. And what they do is so tough. You know, the time is ticking and you have so many tasks to do. You've got to get someone dressed. You've got to make sure they have their food and their, have they got enough to drink? You've got to give them their medicine. But you also have to provide company and have a chat. So you can't just be sort of task focused. You have to be person-centred as well. And that's after you've had a big battle to park. I think what they do is absolutely amazing. I certainly couldn't do it myself. So the care workforce is a really professional workforce. The level of expertise and responsibility of your average care worker is very significant. But there's no external validation of this. So we published a couple of years ago our care workforce strategy. And we're now, people always say, where is your strategy? We say, we've published it, but the real point is we're now in the middle of delivering it. Government is littered with strategies. The real thing is, do you deliver on them? And that's what we're doing, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. And this work is all about recognising and validating the professionalism of the care workforce. So the key things that we are doing. First of all, we've co-designed with the sector, consulted on and published a care workforce pathway, otherwise known as a new career structure for care workers, the very first time that this has been done. So it specifies the skills, knowledge, etc. needed to work at 4 different levels in adult social care and the career paths between them. So we start to make care workers look like other professionals, like civil servants, like NHS workers, with clear levels and grades. Now, obviously, the key is to get 18,000, this is in England, 18,000 adult social care providers to buy into this, because otherwise nothing happens. So we've lined up 30 early adopters representing all types of adult social care providers to trial this approach. Secondly, we are building a digital skills service. So if you're an employer, you will be able to go into this app, you will be able to see what training would suit your member of staff, find out if it's subject to government subsidy, and if so, you can click through to book the training for your staff member and then claim reimbursement. And if you're a care worker looking to develop your career, you'll be able to see where you are in your current level within the career structure. You'll be able to look at options for moving up or sideways, look at the kind of experience you need to progress, and then have the record of the training you have completed all in one place. So when you move employers, and obviously it'd be nice to have less movement, but we have to recognise that that is a reality in the sector. When you move employers, they will be able to access this record with your consent and verify your skills, so you won't need to repeat training. For the first time, we will have a standardised way of recording learning and development for the care workforce, and this is going to go live this summer. Thirdly, we've developed a new level 2 care certificate. So this is like the base level of training in the care sector. So for the very first time, this will be fully accredited, which ends the current madness of multiple different care certificates, which are not recognised by new employers. That's the current system. Every employer will say, no, I want you to do my care certificate. So every time you move employer, you have to sort of start again. From now on, there will be only one care certificate, and it will launch in June, and it comes with over £50 million of subsidised funding, as we announced a few weeks back. And from the next financial year, we're launching a new learning and development fund, many times larger in terms of investment, in terms of subsidy from central government than anything that central government has done before. So, as I say, this is all about recognising the professionalism of care workers. But it's also about so much more than that, because ultimately valuing the workforce leads to better care and support for the people that they care for, who can therefore live better and more fulfilling lives as a result. As we've talked about, care providers currently have to replace almost a third of their workers each year due to staff leaving their jobs. High turnover disrupts care arrangements, making it harder to develop positive caring relationships and build trust. Ultimately, high turnover means lower quality care. But there is evidence from Skills for Care that learning and development can reduce the average turnover rate for care workers by 9 percentage points. And we start from a low base, because 54% of the adult social care workforce don't hold a relevant qualification. So there is a big opportunity from all of this in terms of reducing that turnover. So here's the opportunity to create better retention, better quality for care users, at the same time as hopefully giving better job satisfaction to care workers. There's a long way to go in all of this, but we have made very significant strides over the last few months, with more to come over the rest of this calendar year and beyond. Thank you.
So I get to go last, but that's because I landed what I think is the best job in the world. I got asked to do something that I thought was really interesting and had been working on. I got given a bag of gold to go and do it. And as I got through the door, someone said, oh, by the way, there's no script. We don't really know what you have to do. You have to work that out yourself. And on the way, I have huge debt of gratitude to the principal investigators, my research director, the team, etc., for actually bringing this vision together. So what were we doing? And actually, a reminder, we've not really been back over the history, but 7 years ago, the government of the time set out an ambition to add 5 extra years of healthy, independent living on average by 2035. Actually, broadly, that mission lives on. It now is hidden away in the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, but it's still there as a vision. And I think there's broad all-party support for the idea that now that we're living longer, we ought to be living more of those years in good health. So our vision wasn't actually as specific as that, but it was to enable people as they age to remain active, productive, independent, and socially connected across the generations for as long as possible. That was our formula for what we were doing. And so the work that we're discussing today is part of a much wider strategy for an integrated program of healthy aging-related research and business innovation, and brought what has been a novel focus for many of the disciplines involved in the research. And that was that emphasis on impact on business. How do you do that? Are they the devil, or actually is that your route to impact? And it sits alongside our support for innovation, where we've done investments from spin-outs from universities right through to large scale-up projects. And actually, that's also novel. The spin-outs that we've been doing are not just solely based on science and technology. We've been really encouraging innovation from the arts, humanities, and social sciences. And I had the pleasure earlier this afternoon of listening to 11 of the projects that we funded sort of pitch for prizes as their next stage of their journey into the commercial world. So our sort of community of innovation encompasses what I would say is 3 broad areas, each with a relevance, I think, to healthier working lives and supporting healthy aging at work. And they cover novel applications of technology, so applications rather than inventing new technology, workforce modernization, and business model innovation. And we funded a couple of hundred projects, so you'll probably forgive me for not covering them all, but to give you 3 examples. So the Tribe project is using technology to understand patterns of care needs and care supply, and use that to identify opportunities to attract new people into care, deliver a new way of upskilling people, actually working with Skills for Care, embedding their framework in an online thing, and upskill them as running a care business so they can interact with the care system and actually make a living from it. Second example would be a company called Music in Mind Remote, a spin-out from Manchester Camerata Orchestra, and that might be considered workforce modernisation. So here they're equipping care staff to deliver music therapy without the need for a trained musician to come on site, making a difference, particularly to people in care homes living with dementia. But also, actually, you sort of touched on it, but part of the sort of role enrichment that is possible when you offer new tools to people who are working in care homes, they're not just doing the same thing, they have some added value. And then in the third example, Belvie Care is an example of business model innovation. So they're a home care business, but based on self-empowered teams and inspired by what goes on in the Netherlands, the so-called Buurtzorg model. And their business only really works if you can break away from, and excuse the expression, Michelle, but micromanagement of time and task that is so pervasive in the current system. And it only really works if you can sort of take a longer term view of giving care peaks when it's needed, troughs when actually other people need that help from the peak. So that's broadly what we've been doing. I was asked to say a little bit about what's next. Firstly, I should say that UKRI is actually committed to healthy aging and well-being as one of its 5 main strategic themes. You know, embedded in there are things like net zero. So these are not minor little themes, they're big things. And while there might not be anything as distinct as the healthy aging challenge coming through, I think there are still plenty of opportunities, although we do have, sort of, as Jonathan sort of mentioned, a small issue of a general election and for us internally a spending review that will influence the timing for any announcements of the opportunities. I'd say for our innovation, our business community, that it is the nature of government-funded innovation that we would expect businesses to start to gain traction in the market. And the Department and Health and Social Care have come forward with their menu of innovation in recent months for adult social care, supported by just over £42 million in their Accelerating Reform Fund. So there is work coming in. There was also an announcement of £20 million last year for digital solutions for musculoskeletal and mental health work. And one of the people working on musculoskeletal, so physiotherapy for those not inclined, is an innovation that we project, but is also an innovation project that has been subject to one of the other research projects that we've been doing, the GOLD project based in Stirling, looking at digital interventions to keep older people active. So that sort of shows some of the integration that's been going on in the programme as well. But so that money is the start, and I think what will make the biggest difference specifically for care work is what Michelle has alluded to, that the value of high quality care staff and high quality services to be recognised in the way that mainstream funding is allocated. Central to that is definitely what we've been talking about, that the skills involved in delivering high quality care are recognised and rewarded, and should not just be assumed to be about delivering basic domestic chores, which I think is a common misunderstanding where skills for care work is there. And I don't think it's really come out, but one of the things in your sort of advisory group meetings that came through when I was listening is that there are things that go on in the general world of work that haven't yet got into the culture of many care homes. So job enrichment, job rotation, trying to make the work interesting, having progression in ways that isn't necessarily pay-based, are really important factors, I think, of what was coming out of your work, and we should remember that. And I was sort of saying to Michelle that there are different forms of social care, but actually for the research to have impact, for the innovators to have a route out, that reform of social care now also needs to think about rewarding good outcomes. And I take what Jonathan said, that there isn't extra money, so we've actually got to think about doing things differently with the resources that we've got to get the best impact for the resource available. And I should say at the same time, we want to see employers recognise the value of them supporting health in their own workforce, and that's why UKRI has helped to establish the Business for Health Coalition, and pleased to see the progress made by one of our scale-up projects, Business Health Matters, taking employee well-being services into small and micro enterprises. And you know, I think care homes, although they probably have daily contact with the healthcare system, probably don't think about the health of their own staff quite as much as they could do. I think through research, we've laid some real foundations. We've shown that actually you can bring the business world and particularly social sciences together. Having a research director right from the start has been absolutely critical to that. You know, we have met fortnightly for the last 4 years to make that happen. And I think that close working relationship is something that we would like to see repeated. So a little bit of a glimpse of the future. It's a very quick tour. And I hope that actually what we've done really lays the foundation that people can recognise the good work and think, where do we go next? How do we build on that?
So my plan now is to invite a few questions for 10 minutes or so. So you've got a chance to have a little break before the second half. We'll be hearing some more expert speakers about what's coming next. But we've heard already about the vital and extremely difficult, often as Michelle said, work that care workers do. It's great to see both government and research focusing attention and money on what might be done to improve things. It's very encouraging to hear how researchers are asking the care workers themselves what will help them to do their jobs better. And we've had all sorts of practical ideas. So, who would like to ask a question? Okay, I'm going to take one here and then one here. And perhaps you might just say who you are.
My name's Robert, and I've been studying economy and finance. My name's Robert. I've been studying finance and economy globally since 1980. Now, my interest is obviously in the money sort of thing and financing. And what I want to ask is, in the future, because we have devolved governments, we do research and technology and develop things, and sometimes it's a huge cost, a wastage of money that happens because they go in their different paths, some fail, some success. Take, for example, like Shaw.
So go on, so the question is?
Yeah, the future. Are we going to have more divergence in devolved governments with possible greater wastage, or will we see them narrowing so that we can save money in the future?
Okay, I'm going to take a few more questions and I'm going to invite one person to answer each of them.
Hello, I'm Leon. I actually work at the HSC, but this has been a really interesting talk. I've actually got 2 questions, if that's okay.
We'll see.
Okay.
Keep it short.
First one is about the sort of tech-based solutions. We've obviously established that care doesn't get as much money as we'd like, and we see that in really low wages for care workers and staff. So even if these tech solutions do work at improving staff retention, where is the money coming from? If the pool of money allocated isn't increasing, how are we funding these solutions?
How would we fund the tech solutions?
Yeah.
Okay, second question.
In regards to the sort of upskilling and training and standardized certificates for care workers, that obviously applies quite well to privatized adult care, but a substantial proportion of adult care is done by family members in homes with their relatives. So is there any way we can apply training solutions to them too?
Training solutions for?
People who supply adult care that aren't in the private sector.
Fine. Okay, I can remember 3 questions at once, so I'm going to take those 3 and then I'll invite 2 more. I mean, who knows what the future of the UK governance is going to be, but George, you work across the UK, so is there anything you can say?
Yeah, absolutely. I see great benefit in actually having different perspectives and different approaches and learning from those and sharing. So we definitely, the 4 different NHSs and the 4 different nations come up with different sorts of innovation and have positives and negatives about those. I don't think that the one solution fits all across a 65, 70 million pound population actually is the right way to go. I think we could actually find we make a wrong choice and it has a disproportionately negative impact if we don't do that.
Perhaps I might ask you to respond to the question about who's going to pay for your app.
For the tech. That's a really good question, and obviously we are exploring different ways in which researchers, but also and universities, but also businesses and care providers can actually do that. Technology is quite expensive to develop, not necessarily that expensive to maintain and use in day to day. So we are still very much exploring that, but there are definitely opportunities and options there to go forward.
And the other question about training, Michelle?
I think your question was about training for family carers, informal carers.
Yeah.
So look, I don't think that family carers want the full sort of thing that we're providing to professional carers. But you raise a really important point about support for 5 million or so family carers, without whom the whole country would frankly collapse. And local authorities have a duty to support those carers. They have a duty to assess them and provide for their needs. Our innovation fund that George talked about, actually, an important part of that is innovation for carers, because we really recognise the need to get better at how we support them with respite breaks or whatever it is. So I think there's a need for the support that you talk about, but not necessarily the sort of professional type support.
I've got time for 3 more questions. I'm going to go first of all to the woman behind. Yeah, that's right, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you. My name's Mary Dejevsky. I'm a journalist. I write about these things from time to time. I've got 2 questions, and I'm sorry if they may not seem completely relevant. One of them is you're talking about the care sector as though it's one and the same thing, and everybody assumes that the care sector refers to elderly people. And actually, more than half the budget, and increasing much faster, is working age social care. And I think it might have been useful if maybe you could say something about that distinction, and maybe whether the 2 sectors need to be somehow distinguished. Okay. The second question is about the diversity of the workforce. And there's been huge enthusiasm for basically importing a lot of workers from abroad. And you're talking about the well-being of the workers. And when you look at the 2 main groups, I think, who've come in recently are from India and from Nigeria. Now, I was just looking up. The life expectancy in Nigeria is 55. The life expectancy in India is 70. Both of them are substantially lower than life expectancy here. What implications does that have for the well-being of your workforce?
2 very good questions. Now in front of you, the woman in the blue top.
Thank you. My name's Sophie Bowlby. I'm a member of the HWL team. I want to ask a much more specific question from Michelle about this new training initiative, obviously very interesting, and how you think you're going to, and what your plans are for evaluating that. You said you had a number of trials. I'd be interested to know a bit more about the sort of evaluation and what role care workers will have in that.
Okay, I'm going to take those 3 now. So, well, Michelle, that last one was directed to you,
So absolutely, we're going to evaluate. We've got a sort of big programme of evaluation, and very happy to sort of explain more offline if that's helpful. But all of this, working alongside care, because I think that was part of your question, working alongside care workers themselves, they've been a really important part of how we've developed these proposals, how we've co-developed these proposals. And I don't know if they're going to be part of our evaluation, but it's an excellent point, and they absolutely should be.
And then we had 2 questions about the nature of the workforce. One, and so I don't know whether either of you would like to say something about, as you talked to care workers, the distinction that's been drawn between support for people as they get older versus support for people in their working lives with disabilities or whatever. That was one. And then what about our apparent increasing reliance upon immigration?
Okay. Thank you for the questions. And the first thing I would say is that our projects were specifically looking at the over 50s and in Scotland. So where there's less diversity, you appreciate. But I am involved in another project which is focused on domiciliary care, where in fact those very issues have emerged in terms of migrant workforce and potential examples of what you might term modern day slavery. Quite clear in some areas what can happen. And I think we're all very aware that we're reaching a critical point again, because we also have a political agenda around immigration. So there's lots of tensions. It's a heady mix. And at the same time, we want to make sure that our relatives, our friends receive care. So in fact, it's a moral economy, and sometimes the balance is not so moral, the way it's going. But in terms of our particular projects, I think we would say it's the over 50s, and we did see an increase in diversity in the workforce in Scotland, but very few, I would say, black ethnic minority workers. Some workers who were coming in from parts of Africa, but it was a very small number. And you're always aware of the challenges and the potential for cultural differences and racism, etc. Yes, and I think many of the care owners we work with were too. So I couldn't really comment on the care for the working, but I'm very aware of that, but did not research it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't recruited to chair this panel because of my expertise in the subject. You'll have probably worked that out. I was recruited for my ability to keep the meeting to time. And I don't think it's fair for us just to go straight into another hour without a comfort break or a refresh of the glasses. So I'm going to close this half now. We get 10 minutes comfort break. I've spotted those people who are disappointed that they've not asked questions already, and you'll have first dibs in the Q&A section for the second half, when we hear from some equally distinguished speakers. As we close the first half, can we say thank you to George, Michelle, Yakov, and Liz. Back in 10.
I'm going to go after
a panel of speakers about the challenge, the research, what the Department of Health and Social Care is up to. Now we've got some speakers going to give us some ideas about what next. More Q&A, more food and drink. I'm going to pass over first to Steve, who's the Chief Executive of an organisation called The Lens. He'll explain why. I think there's a pun in there somewhere. Then Annette from King's, Linda, and then some Q&A. Steve, over to you.
I'll just take a moment just as people gather at the back. Come on in, come on in. You're all very welcome. Come on in. Jim, much to your surprise, actually is having a really good time in this photograph. Jim loved playing the accordion. He loved many things. He loved his family, he loved Scrabble, but one of the things he loved most of all was grammar. Jim was literally the man for whom the word pedant had been invented. So, when I created and launched The Lens in April 2015, I couldn't think of anyone better to proofread our new website. So I gave him a call, and I knew that Jim loved to play snooker, and I knew he played every Thursday morning, so I phoned him just after he played a game of snooker when he was in a good mood. And I said, can you help me? I'm under a tight time frame. We've done lots of work on the website. It's going to go public in a few days' time. Can you give it a final check? Of course, he said, happy to help. And then I got a panicky phone call from him the next day, and he said, who on earth did all this work for you in this website? It's littered with typos, and my heart sank, because I thought, if anybody's going to find them, Jim will. And he said, there's one word in particular that you keep misspelling, entrepreneur. Fortunately, at that point, I was able to breathe a sigh of relief and say, it's okay, Jim, entrepreneurship was intentional. It is much more than a typo. That's what we do in The Lens. So what is entrepreneurship? Well, simply put, it's acting like an entrepreneur inside an organisation. And what does that mean? It means spotting a problem and designing a solution. A laser focus on what the customer or the beneficiary actually wants and needs. It's being flexible, responsive, able to pivot and adapt your solution based on what they want rather than what you as an organisation think is needed. It's optimistic and it's resilient, and I would argue it's what we need in ever more amounts across our organisations to respond to the current crises that we face, not just in health and social care, but in other parts of the world. And sadly, Jim's no longer with us. Jim was my dearly loved father-in-law, but he would have been delighted to have heard me say today that we've helped hundreds of entrepreneurs secure over £2.7 million worth of investment in ideas that were lying dormant, that were not being acted upon and are now changing and improving lives. And at the same time, we've developed the skills, the mindset and the expertise of the people behind those ideas. And that's where the real value lies. So what do entrepreneurs look like? Well, this is Gillian and Kenny, who had developed a completely new and novel way of supporting people living with dementia. A new way of working that used the fabulous environment of the Rothiemurchus Forest near Aviemore. Does anyone know where that is? Anyone been there? Beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful. They were getting better outcomes at lower cost, yet it was continually disrupted by the weather and other things. So it was stuck as a really small local initiative. Through our work and through working with Gillian and Kenny, we helped them to develop their idea, and they secured £4,732.28. I did write it down. In the initial prototype to take their first idea into something a bit bigger and a bit bolder. And within 12 months, having evidenced greater impact, greater choice in terms of people actively using that service, rather than the other traditional daycare service that Alzheimer's Scotland ran, they secured a further £980,000 of additional investment to roll that service out more widely. This is Kim and Tommy. Kim has 10 years' experience working in care, in Loreto Care, an organisation based in Glasgow. And Tommy worked really closely with Kim on an idea that they both created. Tommy is profoundly deaf, and they developed an idea which was about responding better, providing better services for people with hearing loss. They developed their initial idea. It was evidenced really well, replicated across Wheatley, and it helped Loreto Care to secure other contracts through competitive tendering because they could able to describe their distinct advantage. And Alan is a 66-year-old great-grandparent. with 19 years experience in social care. And when we first met Alan, he was done. He said, I'm ready to go. I'm waiting to retire. I've been through COVID. I've been through all sorts of stuff. I've just about had it. He was persuaded, reluctantly, to submit an idea to the Lens, which was for an inclusion garden that promoted intergenerational learning, that improved health and well-being and increased activity. He secured investment. His idea is now delivering impact, and it too has been replicated. And 4 months later, he was voted Scottish Care Home Worker of the Year. Alan is re-energised, he's re-motivated, he's passing his skills on to a younger generation, and he's doing incredibly well. So what do all of these people have in common? Well, actually, what they have in common is that they were hidden in plain sight. The potential of their idea and their potential was hidden from view. Their ideas were talked about regularly, but actually there was little action taken. So even when people were looking for those ideas, not enough change was taking place. So my question to you is, are there people and ideas as valuable as the ideas that you've heard here from Gillian and Kenny, from Kim and Tommy and from Alan in your organisations? I guarantee that there is. So what prevents us from actually finding them? Because I know that's something that you will want to do. How many times do we hear people say, we can't keep doing things the way that we're doing, it's not sustainable. And then what do? Precisely that. Because we're too busy, we don't think there's enough time, we don't think there's enough money or resource or enough space to innovate and change. So what if we could unlock that potential? What if we could realise the incredible value that lies before us in relation to the people and the ideas that they have? So how can that be done? Well, I'm going to give you 3 Ps that will enable you to do something about that. And the first is purpose. How clear and how aligned are you and your organisation or your community around purpose? And by that I mean a commitment to deliver on that purpose rather than the way in which you currently deliver it. Does that make sense? Blockbuster and Netflix, anybody remember Blockbuster? It's usually a wave of nostalgia at this point. Blockbuster and Netflix deliver exactly the same value proposition in a very different way. And Blockbuster, of course, had the opportunity to buy Netflix in its early stages. And the rest, of course, is history. So how committed are you to delivering on your purpose and your mission rather than the current way in which you deliver it? The next P follows very closely, permission. How much permission can we create, can you create in your organisation for people to think differently about how that purpose can be delivered? Each of these ideas that I've described, particularly Gillian and Kenny's, was a completely different service delivery model, very different from the existing way in which they did things. And then the third P is about process, perhaps the simplest one of all, actually. And that's a clear, structured process that allows you to take ideas from that initial spark and then to cut and to shape them to discover whether or not they genuinely are diamonds or, indeed, just a lump of rock, in which case we can stop talking about them. So, those are the 3 Ps. And I guarantee you that if you combine a clear purpose and align that purpose across your organisation with increased levels of permission and a clear, structured, coherent process to develop those ideas from that spark into an investment-ready proposition, you will transform your organisation and your community. And you will do that because you will support and enable the people behind those ideas to develop their skills, their expertise, and for their voice to be heard more loudly. That's the biggest difference that we see. That level of engagement, productivity, and motivation that comes from people whose voice has not usually been heard, to have their voice heard and have those ideas put into practice. I've just finished, don't worry. So, the Lens helps people to see things differently. We're a registered charity, we're committed to delivering on our impact, and we would love to help you to discover and find the buried treasure that lies inside your organisation. So my challenge and my provocation, which came with the briefing notes, be provocatively said, so my challenge and my invitation to you is, when you go back to your organisation, look afresh. I guarantee you there is buried treasure lying underneath your noses. And without additional resource and support over the next few years, we're going to have to get much better at developing and realising the value that we already have. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So like Steve, I'm going to be provocative and just in 4 minutes. So that's the plan. So there's increasing body of knowledge that we know about now from the social care workforce, including the great work we've heard about today. And there's also the work that we do in the NHR Health and Social Care Workforce Research Unit. Many of my lovely colleagues are here today. We do work ranging from international recruitment, that someone mentioned earlier, career development, diversity in the workforce, occupational health, all kinds of things. So we know a lot more than we did, and there's more money for us to do research in this area than there was. But the key challenge now is maybe how we actually mobilise that research to support changes in practice. It's surprising how much research sits around after all the work that's done on it and isn't used, isn't useful. When I worked at the Department of Health, I found some of the research I knew about hidden in a filing cabinet, so I know things are sometimes hidden from view. So what I'm just going to very briefly share is a few insights from what we know about how to promote research impact. So I'm going to start off with this visual, which is from some work we did funded by the Economic and Social Research Council to map out all the different things we know about activities to mobilise research. There's a lot on there, but basically there's a body of work that's about very linear work, and this is about how we disseminate research. Very, very important. We're smarter at it than we used to be. We produce accessible outputs, we produce summaries, blogs, infographics. Our team are currently doing a lot of work with animations. We offer webinars. So we're working really hard to push our research out there. And we're also increasingly recognising that much of the work that's involved in getting research to be useful is relational. It's about who we talk to, who we connect with, how we form parts of kind of networks and find time to discuss and talk about the work that we do. And we see increasing amounts of embedded researchers in the care sector. We see brokers, we see learning networks and opportunities for the workforce to engage in research training. I hope none of that is controversial and provocative. This is what we do, and we do more of it, and I think we do it much better, and the volume is there to be seen. What we maybe haven't started to think about quite so much is what does a really good research system look like that is actually going to produce research that is useful at the end of the day. And this really links back to what Steve was saying about where we start when we think about doing really good research for the sector. So the work we do in an initiative called Transforming Evidence looks at how we make research, how it's produced, how we mobilise it, so that's the work we do better now, and actually the use that goes on within policy and practice systems. What I want to focus on today is this bit about the making, how research is produced. Is there scope for us to produce research in rather different ways than we have previously? How is there scope to form closer partnerships around research and practice to tap into all those ideas that are floating around in the system that are hidden in plain sight? This might actually involve having opportunities to really more fundamentally share agenda setting with people in practice. We think we do it, but do we really do it at the moment? To think about what are the research priorities of the sector through a more of an ongoing dialogue rather than one-off consultations. To work in partnership on the management of research with all our different stakeholders, to actually do research together, to collaborate on analysis, and then to work together to promote dissemination and use of that research. We do some of this stuff some of the time. We certainly talk about the fact that we do this, but whether we are fundamentally led by and engaged by the priorities of the sector, I would argue that we've got some way to go for that to be how we work. But there are a number of interesting interventions in this space at the moment, sort of experimental really, about building stronger partnerships between research and practice. So, for example, the NIHR, the National Institute for Health Research, has invested in 6 partnerships to showcase what might be done in adult social care. And these partnerships are employing quite a wide range of different approaches to build closer collaborations. So, for example, the Kent partnership down here, and Anne-Marie's here who leads that partnership. That partnership includes all kinds of activities with Kent County Council that are their partners, fellowships for council staff, researchers in residence, communities of practice around shared areas of interest. And our partnership, which is the Creating Care Partnerships, we have a care home partnership in Newcastle, in Lancashire, in Chester, and those partnerships are working really hard to think what sort of research will be useful for our care home, what would we want to do together, and how do we want to do that together. And a lot of this work draws on kind of work that's been done in the US to build kind of more fundamental partnerships, which are actually shifting the culture in the US around what it means to produce research together. And there are other investments in this space springing up around the country. Last night I was at the UK launch for the local policy innovation partnerships, nattily called LPIPs. And these UKRI investments are setting up new partnerships all over the UK to think about, can we bring this kind of thinking into our work? But this is going to mean, particularly for those of us in universities, working in very different ways. The biggest barrier to the partnership work that we're doing, I would say, are the universities, not the care providers that we work with. But as one of the leads said last night, there's nothing like, this is nothing like anything we've done before, and it'll be better for it. And so he could already see, as a very conventional kind of academic researcher, that making these changes would start to unlock this problem about us producing piles and piles of research and it just not meeting the needs of the community and people on the ground, and really helping to transform practice and help people produce the services that they want to. So I hope that's provocative enough. And yes, thank you.
Just before Q&A, I'd just like Linda to offer a few final reflections.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm the person who stands between you and your questions. So I'm just going to very quickly round up with a few points. What next for care work? Well, it's been great to see so many people here this evening, fantastic presentations, and I hope you can see the interconnections across those presentations. We put quite a bit of thought into planning for this evening, especially around the intrapreneurial and the entrepreneurial dimensions. We really have tried to connect that energy and spirit of where ideas can emerge from and how they can best go back to help us enrich workplaces. And sometimes some of those ideas actually are just sitting there, and Steve, as you pointed out, it just takes that one trigger point, that one moment of listening, that one point when you value somebody, and you can move on and make that difference. But at the beginning of the evening, Jonathan, you pointed out the challenges. You shared with us some of the key statistics. This is a very large workforce. And across the presentations, Michelle, George, they highlighted a number of tremendous initiatives and activities which are going on. We come tonight, we hear about them, we're energized, we're enthused. One big problem: how do we all connect and keep connecting, and how do we ensure that those ideas, those initiatives, then go on to become a patchwork quilt which goes on to become more accepted practices in the workplace and in the delivery of care. And I think for us, the challenge in terms of what next for care work is how to develop those connections, not just in England and Wales, but right across the UK. And I think in response to the question that was asked about devolution, there is a richness there. And the very fact that we have devolved government suggests that there is a difference. We may feel the same at times, but we also want to appreciate and develop difference. And that also gives us that opportunity to explore ways to deliver care and to think about ways we can learn from other delivery systems. Now, there were many questions prior to the Q&A. For us, who are perhaps our researchers, and very good point, Annette, about the challenges of working and connecting outside universities, as well as, frankly, within universities, there's a whole range of questions that we can usefully address in the time remaining. And also we're very keen that you have time to network, because quite key to all of this is you connecting and you finding pathways, and then how we come back to explore the issues in a further session. So I think it might be worthwhile to ask if George and Yakov, do you mind coming back up to the platform, just in case there are any further questions? And
Thank you very much, Linda.
yeah, and do you want to stand and direct the questions?
Well, otherwise there's not going to be enough chairs.
Yes,
So I'll do that.
Yeah.
Let me sit down there, George. So, I'm going to start with the people. Well, have you still got a question? So I'm going to start with the people who didn't get last time, and then I'll bring others in.
Thank you very much. My name is Stanley. I've been recruiting for the care sector for over 20 years.
Can you hear Stanley?
Yes.
Oh, it can come out, can it? Thanks very much.
Thank you. My name is Stanley. I've been recruiting for the care sector for over 20 years. Yes, we have a aging population. We all know that. And thank you for the great work that's been done through the research and all of that. The question I have is this. How important would it be to start having the care sector as a career path from school, when you're leaving school?
Okay.
Can we start thinking about that? Because the aging population is not going to go away. So instead of thinking, I want to work in retail, I want to work in McDonald's, how about I build a career as an option?
Good question.
Yeah.
That's first question. Second one here. Could you take the mic?
My name's John. I chair a thing called the British Design Fund. We invest in well-designed, purpose-led British products. One of the fascinating things I've heard this evening is how much people have talked about design and co-design. And it seems to me like there's been a revolution over the last 3 years in terms of the way that the care workforce has been involved in developing solutions. Is this something that we think is going to continue? And how can we make sure that that really happens?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll take one more, and then I'll get some answers, and then we'll have another go. Yes, thanks very much. You've got a new role here, which you do extremely well.
Run. Thank you. I'm Sarah Ketley. I'm on the Healthy Our Working Lives project with Linda and team. And I've already heard this evening from one of our partners, and we've heard it throughout the project and other projects, that one of the barriers to effective partnership and real kind of equality in this kind of work is decent remuneration for our partners, whether they be entrepreneurs or whether they be care staff and participants taking part. And I just wonder if that's something that this room can have a think about, maybe from a funding angle or an academic leadership angle. How do we put in place the structures to make sure that we're actually being fair to our participants in research?
In funding research?
Yes,
Yeah.
funding
Okay.
research and academic
Fine.
structures.
All right. I can work out who to ask to answer some of these questions, but not others. So I'm going to look for volunteers, and then I'm just going to pick. So, question about the extent to which we should be trying to encourage from school straight into care. Anybody want to have a go at that? Go for it, George.
So, not my subject, if you like, but one of the features that I've heard from a lot of the care providers we work with is the NHS attracting their people away for higher pay. So I think when you talk about that, I think that there is a pathway that might lead in and out of other professions going forward. And I think attracting people who have a calling to care is a good thing, but I think providing pathways back into care when people have done different things in their lives. It may have been stopped to have a family, it may have been actually they want to step back from something busy and add back to the community. So yes, but it's a yes and, I think, from me.
I took away the same message as the second questioner, that we've heard from a number of you about the importance of co-design, that, surprise, surprise, the care workers know themselves how things could be better. It must be hard, so it must remain like this, but it must be hard to get us to a place where the care workers are the engine of innovation, because, well, we've heard from Michelle how busy they are from going from home to home. They're not getting enough sleep. They're not well line managed. There's 18,000 providers. So how do we take that message you've given us about co-design, entrepreneurship? How do we turn that into something which is the way the system works, rather than the way that just the lens works? Steve?
I think that's a two-sided equation. So firstly, there's a responsibility for us as leaders to create that space and to create that listening. I don't know whether or not it works here, but in Scotland there's a thing that you say to your kids when they're really pestering you, which is we'll see. Have you got that? Yeah. So, and what does that mean? It means no. It means no. So there's a managerial equivalent of we'll see when people like these care workers with these ideas saying, why don't we do it this way? There's a managerial equivalent of we'll see. So the first responsibility is for us as leaders to not say we'll see, to find ways to enable that to happen. And then the second part of that equation is to work with care workers and to equip them with the skills to be able to articulate their ideas as investment-ready propositions, as ideas that we can make some value-based decisions about, rather than demanding that everything gets done. So there's an accountability and responsibility from both leaders in the organisations, but also the care workers, and that's where we've seen the biggest difference. When we equip care workers with those complementary skills, that means that their deep subject expertise can be brought to life into those investment-ready propositions.
I could have gone to George again on the fair research funding, but he's already had a go. Do you want to say anything about this question of research?
Yes, I think making sure that we recognise the costs involved for people getting really engaged in these kind of ways, where we're not just asking for an hour of someone's time, but substantial involvement needs to be costed into the work that we do. It is possible. Funders, I think, are generally receptive to providing this kind of funding if we funded it, costed it properly. I'm not sure funders are quite as ready to accept how much longer it might take for the work to done to really allow people to work with us. And that's a different kind of time we're having with our partnership work, that our funders really want us to get finished. And actually the time it takes to work in partnership, it does take longer. It's worth it, but that's about changing how we kind of time our projects. So I think the resource is often, if we ask for it, we can get it. The timing's more difficult.
Next three. Microphone coming.
Is there a process for disseminating the research that is being done in this field? I'm thinking particularly of the partnership ideas. I notice that they are connected with the larger authorities, the county councils, and across this. Of course, in the London area, we have these boroughs, each which does its own thing for better or for worse. But there must be, surely, a process of disseminating information. I'm thinking perhaps of the problems that the miners had that were ignored for generations until the research showed that it was the coal dust, and you can think of perhaps smoking. My daughter here, I remember, was doing an essay, a project on smoking that wasn't known. The results of smoking weren't known. But until the research is disseminated, you won't get a cultural change of ordinary people like me, who, this isn't my field, but I know now that there are ways and means, and that proper research is being conducted.
Great question. Yeah, like you, I've learned a lot this evening, and the question is, how do we make sure that not just the people in this room get to hear about it? That's a good question. Next one. Yeah.
Hi, my name is, can you hear me? All right, my name is Nayak. I used to teach in the University of Birmingham. Right now I'm a human resource for health, health workforce planner, strategic planner. And in this particular context, and now I work for WHO and CDC. I'm very concerned about this 150,000 vacancies. Last year, you said that there are 440,000 people who have left the job of care work. I just want to know where should we not be looking at the planning side, health workforce planning side, that how come from a system of around 60 million people, 440,000 people are leaving the job and 150,000 is being vacant. And at the last moment, we are looking abroad in order to recruit them. Sure. I'm talking about health sector as well.
Sure.
So in many countries, as you know, there is hardly any difference between healthcare sector and care sector. Yeah. So I'm saying that, you know.
The question is?
The question is that is the planning has to be strengthened. Fine. Health workforce planning has to be strengthened.
All right. What are we doing?
And what innovation can we get?
Good question. What are we doing to improve health and social care workforce planning. Anybody else want to ask a question at this point? Yep. Well, I'm going to come to you in a second, but just in case anybody who's not asked a question wants to ask one. Yep. Sorry, I'm guessing you should run round there because you're so good at running. And the guy who's got his hand up.
Think of my age, yeah?
Okay, I would. I'm Vijay Patel. I work for Social Care Institute for Excellence. My question is about media. You know, we're talking media, we're talking about social media, we're talking about writing, written research reports. How do we disseminate in the next 10 years' time? Because the people who read reports now aren't the ones who are going to read them in 10 years' time. They're going to be using their phones. They're going to use video. But we're not talking about dissemination in a very different way, short, sharper. How do we change our methodologies and channels for communicating?
Okay. Good. So first question was about getting the messages out, and you referred to partnerships. Do you want to say anything more about that, Annette?
Yeah, and I guess to give a plug to the London Research Policy Partnership that launched a couple of years ago, the LRAP, which is looking to improve partnership working between research and policy across London, across all boroughs, and is very, very keen that the voices of communities are driving their agenda. So I think that interesting partnership working in London, with the particular challenges you mentioned.
And Linda, do you want to say anything about how you're intending to disseminate what you've learned in this work particularly?
Okay. Well, just to add that there are diverse audiences,
yes.
And I think you need to be mindful of that when you're in a project. First off, you want to feed back to your participants. You want to value their time as best you can. I take the point, Sarah, but you want to feed back so people know what's happened to the information they provided, their ideas, etc. Then we would look at the briefing paper we produced tonight was specifically for businesses, for the entrepreneurs. We'll produce one for researchers, start to think about some classic articles. But for us, it's actually about working with Creative Venue, working with colleagues from Codebase, etc., working with the businesses. And how do we document that? Probably through blogs, probably through meetings, probably through connecting in different media. Because actually the people whose lives are impacted by this research, they're generally not reading newspapers, they're generally not reading academic journals. And it's actually putting yourself in the shoes of their lives and actually asking, what do they read? How would they like to receive the information and how would they use it? Business managers in care homes are incredibly busy. So I think it goes back to the other question that was asked about social media. How do you get in there? How do you make that point swiftly, but in such a way you're almost pitching your findings in order for them to be taken up? It's challenging, and each case is just different. Yeah. It's more time consuming than I think funders and perhaps universities realise, but it's much more worthwhile.
Then we have the question about planning and the rather shocking statistics. I mean, I suppose what I took from the numbers that I heard, albeit it's not my specialist subject, but I think I heard Linda Jacob say something about this earlier, was that if we can make the job of care worker just more enjoyable, if people are better managed, if they get better sleep, if they're more empowered to take ownership of their work and identify the improvements that could be made, they're not going to be leaving in the numbers they're leaving in, and you wouldn't need to recruit quite so many as you do. And so my guess is that central planning will probably have less to do with the answer than the sort of cultural change of the sort we've been hearing from the speakers about. Not to say there isn't a role for planning in there, of course there is, but that was the message I took.
And I would add to that engagement in research also, people seem to view very positively in terms of their quality of life, of work. We do have projects going on in this area in our unit. So, for example, we're about to start a project looking at the impact of kind of retail, so Amazon warehouses moving in alongside care houses and what an impact those have on. So there are some issues around the planning and implications of the kind of the type of paid work that many people are doing.
And then there was a third question about the use of social media to get messages out. I've no idea who to address this question to. Does anybody want to offer anything? George?
Well, and it links back, I think, to what you were saying. So in the last couple of years, we've been working with the British Society of Gerontology, a social science thing,
in their ageing business and society special interest group, and a conversation really about, well, what do business want, what do researchers want, and it's a culture thing. And I see this in medicine, I see this in all sorts of things. And this is where the social media comes in. So researchers typically want to develop a deep question, deepen their understanding, go to the next question and all the rest of it. In the case of businesses, and I think this is true of some policymakers and all the rest of it, they don't necessarily need the depth. They actually want to talk to an expert to synthesize what's known and help them understand what's known. And I think that's where social media comes in. Do you trust anything that comes out, or is there someone who's synthesizing the messages and saying these simple things are there? And it's a culture change, I think, that researchers have to undergo, as well as actually in an education journey for businesses and policymakers.
And do you want to come in as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important question because, again, as a researcher, I think what George said right now. We are interested in understanding deeper what's really underneath, but quite a lot of these issues are something we would call wicked problems. They're very difficult to address. There are no simple solutions to them. So I think there is definitely a role for that academic rigor and especially that academic depth to play with the businesses. One of the things that is definitely coming out of our project, for instance, is the continuation of work with businesses, and there is an obvious, clear understanding from the private sector specifically that this is something that is desired, and they want to continue the conversation. Okay, our project is finishing right now, but we are continuing conversation with NatWest Group, for instance. We are continuing with Blackwood Care. We are continuing conversations within these areas and trying to develop some of this work further because they also see the benefit of having that time together and that building of trust together in order to reach our goals.
Thank you. So, that is now 7:45. Which is when I was told to bring this session to an end. But that's not the end of the conversation. It's certainly not the end of the work, and you've been hearing more about how through these partnerships and other activities we can carry it forward. And Steve you heard from Steve earlier, he's encouraging more providers to work in the way that he's been working with some. But there's also more food and drink, if you want to collar any of these people or each other, for more conversation after I bring the thing to a close. Michelle, who, as I told you, I used to work with, asked me in the break between the first session and the second session, what am I up to these days? And given that I'm an ex-permanent secretary, I think she was sort of expecting something, impressive. And she got something impressive, but impressive in a different way. I spend quite a lot of time these days with helping my 86-year-old mother make the best out of her life as she gets older. And I've come up with lots of great ideas from the sessions this evening, and she's going to be very interested in what I've learned. So thank you very much to our speakers in this panel and in the previous one too, who've had to go, for your contributions this evening. Great to hear about the research. The main message I'm taking away is the importance of, as you put it, co-design, working with the carers to design the service of the future. That seems to me a sort of powerful, important message. It's great to hear how UKRI has been funding that research and wants to carry on in this space as one of its key priorities. Great to see the evidence from the Department of Health and Social Care wanting to make things better. Great to see the academics working with care workers on this. So although the scale of the challenge is huge, at least we've got some people who care about it and are trying to make it better. And I think on that upbeat note, I'm going to bring the session to an end. Thank you very much for coming along.
Can I just ask all the speakers if you wouldn't mind staying just for a moment?
Absolutely.
Yes, just one moment, thank you. Yeah. So,
I got the purpose permission.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.